This week we're going to be starting our discussion of feedstuffs and what they are and some of the different classes of feedstuffs. This is part one of a two-part series on this introductory material. In these first two videos, we're going to be talking about what a feedstuffs is. We're going to talk about defining the International Feed Numbering System. We're going to talk about the AFCO feed classes and also discuss how feeds are evaluated for quality, talk about the relative nutrient values for the various feed classes, and take a look at some key manufacturing terminology that you'll need to know. First off, defining a feedstuff. And a feedstuff is simply a component of a ration that serves a useful function. There are a variety of types of feeds available. It totally depends upon the region, price availability, and a lot of different factors to dictate what feedstuffs a nutritionist will put into a ration. Just understand that when we say the term feedstuff or feed, generally that means a component of a ration that serves a useful function. There are a couple different methods of classifying feeds. We're going to talk about two of them. The first is the International Feed Identification Number, or IFN number, and the first digit of an IFN number indicates one of 8 feed classes. However, that system is not as useful in the commercial feeding industry, and they use a bit more generalized system. So we will be discussing both systems to give you an idea of what you may come across out in the industry. One of the things we need to talk about is when we discuss the International Feed Numbering System. This is an international system, as the title suggests, and it breaks down feeds into 8 different classes. The first 3 classes, categories 1, 2, and 3, are actually what we consider a roughage. We define the term roughage as any feedstuff that is greater than 18% crude fiber. So these are high fiber, bulky feeds, and the first 3 general categories of the IFN system are considered roughages. Category 1, and this is where on the IFN systems, number is important. Category 1 is the dry roughage category. Things like hay, straw, even cottonseed hulls are potential dry roughages. Category 2 is pasture and range grasses and other feeds fed green, which would include green chop, but that's not a very common practice anymore. And so the irrigated pasture out at the university farm, or any of the, like when you see cattle grazing rangelands driving up and down Northern California, those are all category 2 for the IFN system. Category 3 is ensiled roughages, which could include silage and or haylage. If we want to take a look at some samples of these 3 categories, the first picture that we have represents category 1, dry roughages. Hay is the classic example that we'll have in that category. This lower picture represents category 2, the pastures or rangelands, or feeds fed fresh, essentially. That would be category 2. This last picture represents category 3. This is a picture of corn being chopped to be put up for silage. It will be fermented as a wet feed and allow for a certain amount of microbial fermentation to happen to preserve that forage for later use. If you notice, the roughages are going to be the bulky, high fiber feeds, and that is the first 3 categories of the IFN system. The next 2 categories tend to be more about what we call concentrates. Concentrates are defined as feedstuffs that are less than 18% crude fiber. And so we have this magic line that defines roughages and concentrates, and that's the 18% crude fiber. So these feeds are not bulky. They're usually a little bit more dense, and they include the remaining categories for the most part, but specifically categories 4, the high energy supplement or high energy feeds, and category 5, the protein supplements. To give us some examples of what those feeds are, We have here is a picture of a category 4. Category 4, this is sorghum growing in a field. So if we were to harvest these seed heads and feed that cereal seed to livestock, that's an example of a cereal grain, which is an energy feed, or category 4. We have a picture of wheat, which is also category 4, and this is actually distillers' dried grains, which is a protein supplement, which represents category 5. So if you notice, especially in these two pictures here, we do not have a fibrous feedstuff. These are what we call concentrates, but both categories 4 and 5, the energy feeds and protein supplements, can refer to more concentrated feeds. In addition to energy feeds and protein supplements, we have some more concentrates that make up the remaining 3 IFN categories. The last 3 categories are Category 6 of mineral, Category 7 is vitamins, and Category 8 is additives. So if we take a look at some examples of these last 3 categories, we have a trace mineral salt in this first picture with the 2 Hereford-looking cattle consuming it. This is actually a Category 6 mineral supplement of some kind. We have a vitamin premix that would represent Category 7, the vitamins that can be used to add into a ration. This is actually one with electrolytes as well, so it's got some Category 8 in it, but we're going to use it as an example of the vitamins. And the last picture is a chemical compound that can be added into a ration, and it doesn't have nutrient value, but it does provide benefit to the ruminant, specifically cattle. This works really well to increase feed efficiency and production. And so this would be an example of a Category 8 or an additive. So that gives us some general definitions and some examples of the 8 IFN categories. To summarize the International Feed Numbering System, take a look at the feed tables in the back of the book you'll notice that they actually utilize the IFN system. There's an international feed number for each of the feeds, and that first number indicates the feed class. You'll see like a 01 dash something else. That would indicate it's a dry roughage. You'll see a 04 dash something else. That would indicate it's an energy feed. So when quizzed upon this material, it is extremely important to provide not just the name of the category, but the number as well. That number is extremely important and goes with a specific category. This wraps up the first of the 2 slideshows on an introduction to feedstuffs and feed classifications. Be sure to move on to part 2.